Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Assembly Committee on Revenue to order. Madam Secretary, will you take the roll call?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Cohen. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblywoman Gallant. Assemblyman Gray. Assemblyman Haven. Assemblywoman Mosca. Assemblyman Wynn. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Chair Backus.
Present, and Assemblywoman Anderson is also present, and please mark Assemblywoman Mosca present when she comes in. One thing kind of for the procedure for today, I actually have to leave early, and Assemblywoman Cohen is going to come up and take over when Vice Chair Considine is presenting this evening. Hoping we can get 3 bills done in 2 hours would be ideal, but I know reality, I never like to cut people off, but I'm hoping we can do bills in about 45 minutes with presentations running about 15 minutes, support testimony, and opposition each like having 15 minutes. I don't want to cut people off, but kind of stay in that guideline. So I'll try to control this so we can get done in an efficient manner, because we're going to be setting a pace on Monday. The bills that came to revenue pretty much doubled, and so we have a lot of bills to get done before the first committee passage. With that, tonight we have 3 assembly bills on our calendar, on the agenda. The first bill that will be heard is Assembly Bill 427, which revises provisions governing taxes on passenger carriers. The second bill is Assembly Bill 421, which establishes provisions governing the collection of the consumer data of Nevada consumers. And last bill is Assembly 345, which revises provisions governing the commerce tax. With that, I will go ahead and open the hearing for Assembly Bill 427, and I welcome Assemblyman Watts to the Committee on Revenue. And whenever you and your team are ready to be started, please feel free to start whenever.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. It's my pleasure to present Assembly Bill 427 for your consideration today, and we'll do the best that we can to help keep you on schedule today. AB 427 relates to the transportation connection tax. This was enacted during the 2015 legislative session, and it places a 3% excise tax on private passenger transportation companies, including transportation network companies, or TNCs, common motor carriers of passengers, and taxi cabs. And what this bill seeks to do is to help incentivize that sector to reduce tailpipe emissions by providing a credit against that tax over the next few years for the purchase of zero-emission vehicles. The benefits of zero-emission vehicles, I think, are substantial. There can be upfront cost hurdles both for the sticker price of the vehicle as well as for charging infrastructure. However, the overall fueling costs of those vehicles are about 50% compared to the cost of gasoline, and they also have reduced maintenance costs. So if you can get over that upfront economic hurdle, it provides significant operational benefits to the operators. In addition, these vehicles provide substantial benefits to the community. Not only is there a significant reduction in carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, but critically, there's a reduction in other what are called criteria pollutants, and those are the types of tailpipe pollution that have negative public health impacts, including increased rates of asthma, the development of smog, and a range of other lung diseases and ailments. And so the reason that we are targeting this sector through this bill is that these vehicles are on the road substantially more than the average passenger motor vehicle, where on average our vehicles may be on the road 12,000 miles a year. These could be on the road 50,000 miles a year. So we get a significant kind of bang for our buck. Additionally, as those vehicles move out of the fleet, that helps develop a secondary or used market and create additional opportunities for folks to acquire these vehicles in the state. So that is really at the baseline what we're trying to do is create this and you know, as we do have some incentives that have been created at the federal level, there are some complexities to those, so we want to make sure that we are complementing that and helping over the next few years to accelerate adoption and incentivize adoption in this sector. But then phase that down over time as those costs continue to come down for these vehicles and be more competitive. And those benefits continue to accrue across our community. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Goldwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblyman Watts. I'm David Goldwater. I'm representing, I work for Pinion Public Affairs. I represent a company called Captain, as well as Desert Cab and Yellow Checker Star Cab are part of a coalition who have asked me to put together some information and advocate on their behalf for what I consider a very good public policy bill here. In the simplest of terms, what we have is an incentive to accelerate the transition from internal combustion engines to EVs. According to the Energy Info Administration, 29% of all the bad stuff in the air, carbon in the air, is from the transportation section. This not only is difficult on a global scale, and I think we're all familiar with what that means, but locally, a lot of the problems that we have with air quality, as Assemblyman Watts mentioned, whether it be asthma or allergy, are caused by the transportation sector. This bill is pretty simple in its administration, and Nevada is uniquely positioned to have a bill that incentivizes this. In the 2015 session, some of you were here, there was a small fee put on to common motor carriers and TNCs for no particular reason. It was, the minutes suggest that it was put on just in case there was some fiscal impact from enacting the TNC law. When I chaired this committee years ago, I met a woman named Carol Villardo, who would have been crazy to have a fee collected from an industry for which there was no particular nexus and have it earmarked for. She was against earmarked, but didn't like anything at all. Here we have a fee where there is a particular nexus for a very good piece of public policy. And the collection of this fee to be used as a credit, so let me walk you through exactly how this works. Riders in taxi cab limousines are charged something, and when that money is collected by the licensees, that money is then remitted on a return, I think quarterly, to the Department of Taxation. What we're proposing here is a descending scale of tax credits. It lasts about 4 years, starting at $7,500, as you can see in the bill. Rather than the company sending in that $7,500 to the Department of Taxation, it would send in, hey, I bought this electric vehicle and I'm using this tax credit against what I should have remitted to the Department of Taxation for a limited period of time. Couple of issues I think are worth consideration here. In the bill, our intent was to not, this money, over a 6-year period, the average amount of money, and I know this is the policy committee, not the fiscal committee, but it's worth noting, over the last 6 years, the average amount of collection for this has been $23 million annually. $5 million of it goes to the transportation fund, and the remainder goes to the general fund. Our intent is to hold the transportation fund harmless and make sure that what's current, the trend, not to contribute to the downward trend in the transportation fund, and then to use the balance for this program. Further, we'd want clarification, and I'd ask your staff, taxi cab and limousine companies and other livery companies, they not only purchase vehicles, but they also lease them. So to the degree that other financing mechanisms equal ownership, whatever clarification that needs to be in the law for that functionality, we would ask for that as well. I will conclude, if there are any questions, and turn it over to my colleague Kyle Davis for some additional policy considerations.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Davis. I am with Opinion Public Affairs on behalf of the same coalition Mr. Goldwater referenced. I'll be very brief. I think that Assemblyman Watts certainly hit a lot of the good reasons for why we're bringing this bill forward to you today. The transportation sector in Nevada is the biggest source of pollution in our state, especially in our urban areas. And unlike many other states, especially in the east and southeast, where they may have a lot more legacy pollution, a lot more older factories that may be polluting. Here in Nevada, where we are a relatively new state in that sense, a lot of our infrastructure has been built just over the last 30, 40 years. The transportation sector is uniquely a problem when it comes to the pollution that we see in our neighborhoods. And so what our goal is here with this legislation, because taxi cabs and these types of vehicles drive the most in the community, put the most miles on the road, and are operating, as Mr. Goldwater said, upwards of 20 hours a day. We feel this is a place where, given this revenue source that we have available to us, and given the limited nature of the legislation in front of you, but we can really jumpstart the transition to clean vehicles that, when they are operating in our neighborhoods, will be putting out no pollution. So we can actually try to get a handle on this and really reduce the criteria pollution in our neighborhoods. The American Lung Association, in their 2022 State of the Air report, Clark County received an F for both ozone and criteria pollutants. And so we're always interested in things that we can do that can lower those numbers and provide better quality air. And that's really our goal with the legislation that you have in front of you today. Thank you.
And if it's all right with you, Madam Chair, I will very quickly walk you through the bill itself. It's one section, essentially. So Section 1, Subsection 1 is essentially establishing the credit. It has two qualifications. One, that it be purchased, and Mr. Goldwater mentioned that there might be some other arrangements, so we may be looking at that. But critically, two, it has to be placed into service by the taxpayer of the TCT to provide transportation services or transport passengers. Subsection 2 notes how to receive the credit, so they have to provide proof to the Department of Taxation in a satisfactory manner that that vehicle has been obtained and placed into service, and upon request provide additional records to verify that that's the case. Subsection 3 establishes the credit beginning in fiscal year 24, so it would be $7,500 for each vehicle, then descending to $6,000 the following year, $4,500 the following year, $3,000 the following year, and beginning July 1st, 2027, it would be completely sunsetted and phased out. Subsection 4 clarifies that this credit cannot be applied retroactively, so any vehicles that are in service before the policy goes into effect would not qualify. Section 5 allows for a carryover of the credit. Subsection 6 provides the department the ability to penalize any taxpayer that misrepresents information in order to receive the credit. And then subsection 7 has the key definitions, all related to what is a qualifying vehicle, which I will note. You can find that definition in item C, and the other definitions relate to that. So with that, I think that concludes our presentation. We're glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much, bill presenters, for your presentation. And I apologize, I wasn't listening, but I didn't see where it would hold that general fund harmless. Is that just an anticipated, not general fund, the highway fund harmless, that first 5 million, is that anticipated to be an amendment?
Madam Chair, David Goldwater, yes. The two considerations that for your staff and committee is that hold harmless, which didn't make it into the bill, and the lease clarification. Further, we have put some information on your Nellis, just policy information, and bring to your attention. You peruse it and support material for this policy and information for you to take a look at.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will start with Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. When we discussed the bill earlier, I had asked some questions, and something that came to mind in your presentation, you talked about, wanting to capture the vehicles that are on the roads the most, and that would be taxi cabs, that type of thing. Has there been any thought also to including or someday expanding to capture rental car fleets? Because I think those of us who rent cars when we're home on the weekends have now become very, very familiar with rental cars and know that obviously that there's a very active rental car world in Nevada.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Cohen. For the record, Howard Watts. Great question. My personal passion is helping to support the transition to clean transportation for everybody. I have another piece of legislation being considered by this body related to larger, heavier duty vehicles, again, that have significant tailpipe pollution emissions and that are on our roads, again, a significant amount. They're on our roads no matter what, no matter how good our transit system is. When it comes to the rental car industry, I know that they have their own specific taxes, so this bill does not contemplate, and I don't think it would fit into this piece of legislation, but I'm always open to considering policies that would help facilitate transition to cleaner vehicle fleets, including in our rental car sector.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the quick bill presentation as well. I just wanted to double check. I had talked about this also in the meeting that I had with some individuals yesterday. This does not include Lyft or Uber, is that correct? If you could expand upon that a little bit.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. This does not explicitly preclude transportation network companies or TNCs. However, they operate on a different business model. So they do not manage a fleet of vehicles themselves. So they do serve as a taxpayer and they collect and remit that, but they don't have a fleet. So drivers employed by the TNC own and operate their own modes of transportation. So if they wanted to modify that business model and procure vehicles and deploy them in a fleet, then they would be eligible because they are a taxpayer to take advantage of this tax. But that doesn't really fit within their current service model, which is billed by TNCs not as actually providing a transportation service, but of connecting to different individuals for the purpose of facilitating that transaction.
Do we have any other questions from committee members? Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for your presentation. Just to clarify, it says taxpayer. Are there instances where the taxi cab driver is the taxpayer who is not being, vehicle is not being leased, not being purchased by the taxi company, and would be in the same situation as a TAC driver who would then be directly able to get this type of benefit.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. So no, the taxpayers that pay the transportation connection tax are explicitly transportation network companies. So those companies themselves, that is, within their platform, that is built into essentially the fare that is charged to those customers. It's collected, but it goes straight to the transportation network company, and that company is the taxpayer. So it's not an individual driver. An individual TNC driver is never responsible for remitting the transportation connection tax for their vehicles. The other taxpayers are common motor carriers. Again, that's the company, not the individual driver, and then taxi cab companies, essentially.
Thank you for that. Do you have any data that talks about the difference between whether or not it's the taxi cabs or our Uber and Lyft drivers? Do we have any data that shows the contribution to greenhouse gas from large motor carriers, big trucks, as opposed to taxis and Uber, Lyft, especially when we're talking about in communities? And I think that needs to be, I know that pollution travels, but we also hear, even last session, we often hear things like, in our communities and heat islands in our communities, but that's not where the pollution is being created. It's drifting, because I'm not certain that we're seeing. And we sometimes suggest solutions that are not necessarily helping the communities that are being affected by this, because those communities are often near a freeway. So this kind of thing is not necessarily connected to helping those communities. And so I'd like you to sort of explain that and just be clear about the difference.
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. So as far as extremely specific data on kind of the subcategories within the transportation sector, I don't know of that offhand. We can look and see what information out there might be available, and whatever we can find, we'd be glad to follow up with you about that. Not to go too far outside of the scope of this bill, but medium and heavy duty vehicles are a significant contributor of tailpipe pollution. They are about a third, I think, of greenhouse gas emissions related to transportation, to vehicles overall, and about 50% of those criteria pollutants, those unhealthy pollutants that come from vehicles, come from about 5% in that medium and heavy duty vehicle sector. So these kind of fit still within the overall broad category of light duty or kind of passenger vehicles. We have started to do some mileage gathering through the Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know what information gets reported out to the Taxi Cab Authority, but that might be something where we can get a little bit of an understanding of the impact. But again, I think at a high level, one, we know that these vehicles are putting significantly more miles on the road, and so again, it's kind of figuring out how, and we have this particular mechanism through this tax, so the stars kind of align to get a good bang for our buck. Second, to your point about impacted communities, I'd just say two things. One is there are a variety of options now available to drivers. Some lease vehicles from the company, some serve as employees. But again, those potential fuel and maintenance cost savings have the potential to benefit not just the company but the drivers. And we know that it's a working class, very diverse occupation. Additionally, you mentioned freeways, and so we know that in general, high traffic corridors are going to have a lot of heavy duty vehicles and folks using those as transportation corridors. And so my hope is that if we can get all other things that I'm working on and this all put into law, we can really decrease the those pollution corridors, which a lot of lower income and historically disadvantaged communities are adjacent to.
Thank you so much for your guys' presentation. With that, we'll go ahead and move into testimony in support of Assembly Bill 427. Is there anyone in Carson City who wishes this evening to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 427?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Isaac Hardy, representing the Nevada Conservation League. Transportation continues to be the top source of climate pollution in Nevada. Additionally, gas-powered vehicles produce tailpipe emissions that are damaging to our health and are linked to many respiratory illnesses such as asthma. By incentivizing these businesses to add more EVs to their fleets, we can take major steps to clean up our air. And with that, we are in support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hardy. Anyone else in Carson City wishing to give testimony in support of AB 427? With that, we'll go ahead and move to the phone lines. BPS, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 427?
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 427, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 177, please press star 6 to unmute.
Hi, my name is Jamarion Williams, and I'm representing Western Resource Advocates. Western Resource Advocates is a regional nonprofit advocacy organization fighting climate change and its impact to sustain the environment, economy, and people of the West. I wanted to call in today to say that we are in full support of AB 427. Transportation network company vehicles will play a significant role in Nevada's decarbonization efforts moving forward. According to the state of Nevada's most recent greenhouse gas emissions inventory, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for more than 36% of the state's emissions. Transportation emissions are also a major factor in Nevada's noncompliance with federal air quality standards and contribute to 58,000 premature deaths per year in the United States. The electrification of TNC vehicles will help cut these emissions and improve Nevada's air quality, creating a safer environment for our state. Due to the high usage of TNC vehicles, recent research from Rocky Mountain Institute found that electrifying a single full-time TNC vehicle can have the same emissions impact as electrifying 3 privately owned vehicles. And with that, I would like to say that Western Resource Advocates is in full support of AB 427. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Chairwoman Brackus and members of the committee, thank you for hearing AB 427. My name is Michael Brauchle. That is spelled Brauchle. I am a professional driver for Desert Cab Company in Las Vegas. I'm calling in to voice my support for this bill because I feel it's important to me and drivers like me who have more electric vehicles on the road. I'm a resident of Nevada. My family and I live and work here. I make my living by driving the vehicles my company provides. I prefer to drive the electric vehicles for a number of reasons. I try to drive EV cars as often as I can because I save money on fuel by driving them. Unfortunately, my company only has a few of the vehicles because it's my understanding that the EVs are significantly more expensive than the gas vehicles. This bill will allow them to purchase more vehicles, which will allow more drivers like me the opportunity to drive these particular vehicles. And driving an EV puts more money in my pocket to bring home to support my family. Furthermore, EV are zero emission vehicles, and I get to do my part for the environment. I drive a lot of miles on a day-to-day basis. So driving the EV makes me feel like I'm doing my part to help the environment. My customers love riding in the EVs, as I would hope they feel the same as I would to ride an EV. I have received numerous, compliments from the passengers about how they feel taking the EV, and this is why I support AB 427. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Next caller.
Chairwoman Backus and members of the committee, thank you for hearing AB 427. My name is Andrew Breyer. That is spelled Breyer. I am a professional driver for Virgin Valley Cab Company in Las Vegas, and I am calling in to support Bill AB 427. I am a resident of Vegas and have lived here for about 15 years. I've been driving cab for about 10 of those years and prefer to drive electric vehicles. I like driving EV vehicles because it is good for the environment and it saves me a lot of money on fuel. When I drive an EV, I make more money and tips always seem to be higher. Customers love riding in the car. In fact, many customers prefer to ride in it over the gas vehicles. I believe that is what contributes to more tips. The customer feedback about the EV is always about how we are saving the planet. This is why I support AB 427, and thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Hello, Chairman Backus and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing AB 427. My name is Pragnit Thakor. Last name is spelled Thakor. I'm a resident of Nevada, and I drive a cab in Las Vegas for Desert Cab. My company provides me and my teammate a car to drive. We approximately drive about 250 miles a day, plus or minus about 5,000 miles in a month. So there's a lot of miles on the road for that, driving the EV. And so basically it saves us money on fuel, and then it basically reduces the carbon footprint by driving an EV. Since driving the EV, I've been able to make more money taking home for me and my family. That allows us to keep up with inflation. So I hope my employer can purchase more EVs to allow other drivers to make a little bit more money for them and their families as well. So I feel strongly that if there's a way for these companies to support for AB 427, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Next caller.
Hi, Chairwoman Backus, member of the committee. Thank you for hearing AB 427. My name is Jay Chen, Chen. I'm a professional chauffeur for an EV luxury car service company. I took time out of my day today because I know how important this bill is to me and drivers like myself. First, I'm a resident of Nevada, and this is where my family and I call home. Anything you can do to improve the quality or the air quality and reduce allergies will be great help to my family and I. I also make my living by driving vehicles that my company provides. I prefer to drive electric vehicles for many reasons, not just to improve the air quality, but also it provides a better passenger experience and I do not have to pay for the gas. I feel strongly that if there's a way to get these companies to buy more EVs, it should be your priority. More electric vehicles on the road is better for all of us. This is why I support AB 427 and hope you do too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And BPS, by my count, I believe that's the last caller in support.
Yes, Chair, we have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 427. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in opposition to AB 427? With that, we'll go ahead.
Was Rizard, Deputy State Director with Americans for Prosperity, that's spelled WIZROUZARD. Our concerns with this bill is while we're opposed is this appears to be creating some special carve-outs for industries, and we believe that when it comes to taxes, it should be applied across the board. We don't disagree with the intent of the bill. We just think that if individuals, whether it's a company or sole proprietor, it's going to be operating in this industry, then these type of benefits should be applied to everyone. So we urge the bill sponsor to consider that. And if we want to make and continue to have Nevada be a model state for economic opportunity, we have to consider every single aspect of those industries and those individuals, whether they're sole proprietors or a major corporation or an entire entity. So thank the bill sponsor for the time, and thank you, Chairwoman, for the time as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone else here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 427? With that, we'll go ahead and move to the phone lines. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone wishing to give testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 427?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 427, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 427? Okay, BPS, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 427?
If you'd like to testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 427, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. Do either of the bill sponsors want to come up and give some closing remarks?
Madam Chair, David Goldwater with Pinion. Thank you very much for the time to present today. I think the drivers made some point that I did not make, and that is the drivers pay for their own fuel in some companies, not all, but some. And so not paying for that fuel, especially at today's gas prices, as you might imagine, actually puts money in their pocket too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 427, and we will move on to Assembly Bill 421, and we have the bill sponsor here, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Please make your way up to the dais, and when you are ready to start, go ahead. Yeah, Assemblywoman, we did know it was not loaded, so you do. We thought you would have your thumb drive, but yeah, if you can grab that, that would be great. Okay, yeah, take 1 minute recess. Oh, look at this.
Okay, I think we are set. So I am Assemblymember Selena LaRue Hatch, and I am the Assemblymember from Assembly District 25, which is Northwest Reno. And I just want to thank our chair and vice chair and all of my wonderful colleagues on this committee for hearing my bill today. So AB 421 is a data privacy bill. And so you may wonder how a data privacy bill is ending up in revenue, but I promise I will explain how the two are connected momentarily. But I would like to start by just talking about why data privacy is something that we need to be concerned about. Today, there are many companies that are engaging in extremely invasive data harvesting. They are keeping hundreds of data points on every single one of us. They are not just tracking your contact information, they're tracking where you go, they are tracking who you are in proximity to, they are tracking the buildings you enter, they're tracking your preferences, they are tracking what makes you emotional. They literally, on some of these apps, track the number of seconds your eyes remain on an image, so that later they can give you more images that will keep your eyes for longer. And some of these companies, many of them, their goal is to get you in a heightened emotional state, because a heightened emotional state means that you are more likely to respond to ads, you are more likely to respond to algorithmic manipulation, you're more likely to stay on the app. And all of those are large reasons why we are seeing increasing polarization online today, because polarizing images, polarizing text gets you in that heightened emotional state, and then it causes you to do all of those things that I just described. And so I am very concerned about data privacy, and I think all of us should be. In addition to the data they are keeping in order to manipulate our behavior, there are concerns over the data storage, because if there is a hack, now all of your sensitive data is out there for others to see. Obviously, I think there's just general privacy concerns that I think most of us don't want to be spied on overall, and then our consumer protections. And so I just put on here some stats, because I don't know that everyone knows how much is being collected about us. And so these are just stats of the percentage of people who realize they are sharing these things. And by the way, you are sharing all of these things. If you have any social media apps, if you have smartphones, if you're using a lot of the modern technology, you're sharing obviously your friends list, you're sharing your location with many of them, your web searches, your communication history, including your chat logs and what you are saying, your IP addresses and your web surfing history. And all of that is going into a profile about you. And then I wanted to show the concerns that people had. So these are the percentage of adults who say they feel like they have very little control over the data that companies collect versus the data that governments collect. 81% believe they have very little control. 81% believe the risks of data collection outweigh the benefits when it comes to companies. 79% are concerned at how much companies are harvesting. But 59% have very little understanding of what is going on. And I won't belabor the point too much, but I also wanted to include this chart, which I think was also in the one-pager that was provided to you, so you could see some of the most popular apps and the information that they are keeping about you, because it is pretty significant, and I think it is pretty shocking to people when they look at these charts, especially, we obviously expect Facebook keeps a lot about you, right? But I think some of these other apps that are not social media apps may surprise you at the information that they are collecting. So the goal of my bill is to discourage this practice. Yes, it includes revenue, but ultimately, I am trying to use this revenue in order to discourage the practice. Now, the reason that these companies are doing this is because it's extremely profitable. They are making multi-billions of dollars in ad revenue and in the revenue for social media companies and in this data manipulation. And they're not paying anything for it. They don't have to pay for a physical product because you are the product. They are not paying taxes on a physical good because there is no physical good. And if you were a company that didn't have to pay any extra money to make all this extra profit, why wouldn't you? There really is no disincentive to do so. And so my goal is to create a fiscal disincentive for that practice. And so that is what this bill does. It is meant to update our tax code by creating an excise tax on this new area of revenue. It is meant to bring digital or tax parity with our Nevada businesses that are paying taxes on physical goods, and it is meant to discourage the practice. So as you may have seen in Section 14 of the bill, as it is currently drafted, it includes an excise tax. This is modeled off of language from other states, so it's not something that I just came up with myself. I just adapted it to our Nevada populations with the help of our illustrious tax experts who helped me figure out all these details. But it starts at 5 cents a month per Nevada consumer when you're harvesting on more than 150,000 Nevadans, and then it scales up to 50 cents a month per consumer that you are harvesting on for 1.5 million Nevadans. And that is about half of our population, so that would be significant amounts of data harvesting if you were to get to that top level. It is also structured like the income tax bracket, so you wouldn't pay 50 cents a month on all 1.5 million. It's just once you cross that line, the very next one is 50 cents, and then it continues upward from there. What it does not do, and I want to be very clear here, my goal is not to stop loyalty cards. It is not to stop couponing. It is not to stop traditional advertising or brick and mortar store transactions, right? Businesses do keep data for very legitimate reasons, and they're not necessarily using it to manipulate behavior. But it is very difficult for us to dial in that language. And so I just want to give you some context. We are working on amendments, and you have an amendment before you, and we are working on dialing in the language. However, there are some federal laws, including the Internet Tax Freedom Act, that constrain how much we are able to do here. And I am happy to pass that to our legal counsel if they need to explain a little bit. But if you're wondering why I didn't just say online, or I didn't just say tech companies, it's because we can't just explicitly say online or tech companies. And so what I am attempting to do, if you'll notice even in the amendment, I've already narrowed down consumer data to include profiling, so that it's not just you're collecting data, but you are profiling in this manner that I have described. I've added amendments that include more of the classifications that I'm looking at, and I am continuing to work with stakeholders to dial in that language. We just got this released on Monday, and then we had a hearing today, so the language is still changing, but I wanted to let you know the intent so that we don't necessarily get hung up on the language. We're trying to narrow it as much as we can and still be within those federal guidelines. So that is where I'll leave it, because I'm sure there will be lots of questions.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member LaRue Hatch. We appreciate your presentation. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to questions. We'll start with Assemblyman Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick question. We can't stop spam. How are we going to enforce this?
So I don't know that this is necessarily the same as spam, although I would like to stop spam also. The way that we have put in the enforcement mechanism is it is currently self-reporting, because obviously there is no database right now telling us every single company that is harvesting on you and how much they are harvesting. So it has to start as self-reporting, and then I think we can build up from there. But there are penalties within the bill if you are shown that you are not accurately reporting what you should owe under this excise tax.
Okay, I'm sorry, just to clarify, and I wasn't saying this had anything to do with spam, it was just an example. So how are you going to go after these companies and audit them? I mean, who's going to be responsible for that? I mean, it sounds like there's going to have to be another bureaucracy to support it.
So within the bill, you'll notice that there does include language that the Department of Taxation will enforce. We're not the money committee. This will have a fiscal note to pay for the staff members. They anticipated they would need about 4 staffers in order to enforce what I have envisioned here. And so they would be dedicated just to this. And obviously some of the proceeds that come in from this would be used to help pay for that. This obviously would be a net plus on the budget because it is new revenue, so it wouldn't necessarily cost us more for that enforcement.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman. It's good to see you in revenue. You mentioned tax parity, and I was just kind of curious with the list that you provided, if they were already subject to the commerce tax, and if this would end up being in addition to the commerce tax.
I think I will probably phone a friend to your staff on council to see if they are already subject to that.
Thank you with that. Sorry about that. We will turn this over to Mr. Nakamoto to give us some insight on the commerce tax.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division. In response to Assemblyman Hafen's question, to the extent that the business already is engaged in business in the state and is generating more than $4 million of Nevada gross revenue as defined for the commerce tax, they would be liable. So the provisions in this bill would additionally apply as well as the commerce tax.
So just quick follow-up, Madam Chair. Would this then constitute basically double taxation on the same income?
We will turn that over back to Mr. Nakamoto.
And if I could just clarify, I guess it would only be on the amount over the $4 million that's generated would end up being double taxation. The stuff below would not. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Madam Chair, Assemblyman Hafen, Michael Nakamoto for the record again. I believe that is correct. If both conditions apply, they would be subject to both taxes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. And so now I'm interested in commerce tax. So if I could, I wasn't going to ask a commerce tax question, but just to make sure I understand, if I may, Mr. Nakamoto. So if you're at, let's say, $3,500,000 in sales, and then tax, and then the money you're getting from the sale of this data gets you over the $4 million. It's in gross, gets you to over $4 million in gross. Then that would get you subject to the commerce tax, even if your original sales didn't get you to the $4 million gross.
Madam Chair, Assemblywoman Cohen, Michael Nakamoto for the record. Any Nevada gross revenue in excess of $4 million is subject to the commerce tax at the applicable rate, irrespective of the source.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Chair. Okay, then, and thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's really important for us to be having these conversations. And I appreciate that you're still working on this and that the language isn't quite, as we often say, soup yet. But so I do just want to clarify some things, though, and make sure I understand where you're going with it. So in Section 3, I want to make sure with that definition of commercial data collector, so Section 3 sub A, so that just has to be a business that is, that language that says sells or shares consumer data in support of its business activities, even if that's not its main activity, it's still covered under this bill.
Yes, thank you for the question. So, as I said, we are trying to dial in the language. Originally, we had thought just saying sells data, because obviously we're very concerned when they sell data. However, some of these social media companies don't necessarily sell the data, but are still using those dark matter algorithms and those profiles to manipulate behavior on the app. And so to discourage that practice, we couldn't have it just be sells. My intention is not to stop a business from keeping just normal records on their customers. My intention really is to target this hyper aggressive profiling that is happening within these companies.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for indulging me. And then in Section 13, Sub 1, in the where the department is examining books, papers, and records, is that covering, so I would imagine this would be very technical there, and books, papers, and records just sounds like paper to me. So does this cover their electronic systems, and if they're keeping everything, all of their data, no matter how they're maintaining it?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, because I think it's an important one. That is the wording that came out of LCB, and I'm not sure if that's standard wording that they always use, but the intention is obviously that most of this is electronic, and so they would need to be able to see if they're storing things electronically as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Vice Chair Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this bill and being able to have this conversation. I have, I guess, two questions in a way. Is there a basis or a touchstone as why it's every 150,000 people? And then the second part is, I know in here it says that you don't count the same person in each month, but if you're talking about some of those on the list where people are on it every day, does that mean that there would be a basic idea of what the base is? Because a lot of these, Facebook, TikTok, all of these have the same people coming back all the time. So they would be counted once every month.
Yes, that is correct. We didn't want to necessarily count them every single day because we felt like that would probably be pretty exorbitant. But if you're tracking them within that month, then you would be included. Now, I will say I am working with stakeholders on a conceptual amendment to perhaps change that scale a little bit to be amount of data, because if a company is keeping one data point on you versus another company that's keeping 500 data points, that might not necessarily be fair to charge them the same, and is not actually discouraging what I'm trying to discourage, right, which is harvesting this insane amount of data. And so that language is still being worked on, but I think we are attempting to dial it in so it really is discouraging this excessive amount of data collection.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this. I know when we've been discussing it and you've been explaining it to me, you've shared what other states are doing. So I know you kind of mentioned it, but if you could just add more context of how it's happened and what has happened with it.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So this is currently being considered in New York. This is language that is very similar to the New York language. We are the only two states that are looking at discouraging this behavior through a fiscal method, but there are many, many states that are considering data privacy this session. I think that, as we all know, data privacy is increasingly concerning. My thought was, we do have several data privacy bills this session. I wanted to attack this from another angle because I think, as this committee well knows, money can drive behavior, and I thought this might be another avenue for tackling that. And I have talked to the sponsor in New York about this, and we have talked about tactics and methodology and some goals to try to keep it in line, because obviously the internet crosses state lines. And so as much as we could keep it similar, that may be helpful for these companies that really are crossing many borders.
Thank you so much we have one more question from Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you for this. I mean, I appreciate the fact that I don't like having my data stolen or sold, whatever. But just on a practical level of this, has there been any estimation on how much revenue this would actually result in?
So that has been a very difficult thing for us to calculate because it is so new, right? We are talking about completely modernizing our tax code. This is an area where there aren't current databases. We don't know how much data is being collected. I actually think that's an important part of this legislation is, if anything, we'll start knowing which companies are collecting your data, because there might be some out there, or there definitely are some out there that are collecting and you might not realize it. And so I can pass it to Mr. Nakamoto. We've had multiple conversations about this, but the problem is we're really struggling to figure out the amount because we just don't know how many companies are doing this.
Mr. Nakamoto, do you want to add on to that?
For the record, Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division, to take cues from other people's brevity, ditto.
Thank you so much. And we will go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And this is really interesting to read. So I've read it a few times, and I only have a few questions, only two. My first question, actually, though, has to do with Section 14. So it's on page 4 of our bill. And I love how detailed oriented it is with the exact number and everything. With the use of the monthly information, are you also expecting monthly payments, or for the department to kind of look at this stuff monthly? I understand where the collection information is coming from, but are you also expecting that payment to be done monthly, yearly, quarterly, or is that still a little bit too early to figure out?
I think the intention was quarterly. It is a monthly fee, but we don't anticipate collecting it every single month, so we planned on quarterly.
And I just didn't know if that was already in here or not, and I more than likely looked over it. But that's just something that maybe the department can look into. And then my second question has to do with page 6, section 16. And that is this registration statement that is listed out? That would be, first you've got the registration statement, and then there's also a fee that's accompanying for that. If you could go a little bit more into what that fee is being utilized for, and or if that is in addition to other fees that are in place.
Thank you so much for that question. I think you are the only other person that is as detail-oriented about this as I am. So that actually comes from several other states that are requiring registration of data collectors. And that registration fee is partly for maintaining that list and maintaining that website. And that comes from the several other states that are creating these registries. That was, I think, the most recent one may have been California, and they had that fee, but we just felt like that was reasonable to keep it in line and to keep the website up to date in the maintenance.
And this entire committee is incredibly detail oriented, believe me. So with that, the several other states, did they start off first with this fee, and then are they planning, like, understanding that this is you using a crystal ball to look into the future and not always necessarily there, but are they starting off first with this fee and then planning on moving forward into other areas? Or I guess I'm asking what the purposes of the fee as well.
So I know New York, which is considering this legislation, does require the registration and the fee. New York created an entire division within their state government just for this, for data and tracking and privacy. So I think that was associated with that. I am not married to the fee. I think if the committee would like to see changes on that, as I said, this is a growing and evolving document. We just wanted to have an official place so we can see who are the companies that are doing this practice. And so if we think that's too high or that it shouldn't be there, I am open to that discretion. But I know that multiple states have created these divisions as a step of tracking. And then, yes, other states are looking at other ways that we can curb this behavior. But as I said, it is pretty cutting edge. And so we're all kind of working our way through this together to figure out the best way to do it.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair.
And thank you. With this, we'll go ahead and move on to giving testimony in support. If there's anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in support of 421, please come up front and start when you're ready to push mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA supports AB 421 to strengthen data privacy for Nevadans while also generating revenue for the state. Some of the largest corporations in the world store personal data about Nevadans through invasive data harvesting, which they then use to target and manipulate user behavior. Data harvesting is big business, with corporations making huge sums of money off its use while also increasing corporate valuations. Similar to digital goods and services, data harvesting goes untaxed or largely untaxed and largely unregulated. Monitoring Nevada's tax structure as technology develops will not only deliver revenue to the state, it will also bring tax equity to smaller Nevada businesses and discourage the practice of data mining. AB 421 is smart public policy that will increase privacy protections for Nevadans online and improve parity between Nevada small businesses and large tech companies. Thank you.
Chair Backus and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee. My name is Sena Lloyd, SENALOYD, president of the Web3 ID Coalition. The Web3 ID Coalition unites technology, industry, and government leaders in the pursuit of a digital identity ownership for all. We advocate for public policy shifting control of digital identity away from big tech and large corporations to where it rightfully belongs, to that of the individual. We pave the way for a more secure, portable, and trusted digital identity using decentralized, distributed, blockchain-based internet, empowering individuals to own that data that they have and move from a Web 2 to a Web 3 world. The coalition has met with the bill sponsor and discussed the benefits of a Web 3 identity and ownerships of individual's identity and being returned to the individual. We have provided language to tighten up definitions and suggested how the excise tax on an individual's data could in fact be used to facilitate the transition from to individual ownership of that data through and drive state agencies to maybe issue verified credentials, for example. That would allow individuals to give permission to access and revoke permission to an individual's data to a corporation, and maybe profit off of it in the process. We look forward to further conversations with the bill sponsor.
Kent Irvin for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Please support AB 421. Nevada's tax structure is increasingly concentrated on traditional but smaller and diminishing industries and sectors of the economy and leaving out the new digital economy. Our economist colleagues tell us that the best taxes are small per person or transaction, but most broadly applied, and this bill seems to fit that. Personally, I'm the type who likes to read every word of a contract or agreement, but online I've just given up. And so I know there are many, and this list says there are many companies out there that are taking my data and selling it and profiting on it. And I suspect many of those transactions never have a Nevada nexus in order to be taxed in any way in Nevada because it's a long-distance relationship, except for the person in Nevada whose data is being used that way. So we're all worried about sustainability of the state and state government and our education system, so we need to modernize our taxes. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, Tony Ramirez for the record, TonyRamirez. I represent Make the Road Nevada, and on behalf of our membership, we thank the bill sponsor for bringing this forward. We particularly like the additional revenue this potentially may bring. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we will go to BPS. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in support of AB 421?
Callers 421, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lilith Barron, Lilithbaran. I'm with the ACLU of Nevada. We think this bill is very smart, a wonderful way to tackle gaining more revenue as well as securing data privacy. We thank the sponsor for the bill and hope that you choose to support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. BPS, do we have any other callers on the phone wanting to give testimony in support?
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Great. We will go ahead and move to testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 421. Is there anyone here wishing to give testimony in opposition? Please start when you can hit the mic, Mr. Morley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Morley. I represent the Nevada Press Association. We currently stand in opposition. I did not have a chance to talk to the sponsor before this hearing. A few years ago, the Maryland Legislature passed a digital ad tax, and they exempted newspapers in Maryland. The Nevada Press Association would request the same consideration for Nevada, but I will continue to work with the sponsor. Thank you.
Wiz Rizard, Deputy State Director with Americans for Prosperity, and that's spelled WIZROUZARD. Thank you, Chairwoman, for the opportunity to share concerns in regards to this bill. Let me start by saying I watched Social Dilemma on Netflix. So if you've watched that documentary, and if this is what inspired the bill, I can understand the intent. However, this is the 21st century. There's a couple things I do want to address. First and foremost, they are paying for something. It's the medium in which they need to aggregate the data to begin with, whether that's your cell phone or an app, okay? When you look at cell phones and apps, most consumers are entering that private contract voluntarily, okay? I think when we talk about data privacy, we need to talk about the front end side of making sure consumers are educated in regards to what they're agreeing to enter. And if we're going to force the cost to the consumer, I think we need to make sure that we have that conversations as well with our community members. In terms of the taxation, it is an excise tax. It's double taxing an industry. The third thing is when we talk about consumers, we're talking about individuals who are making informed decisions most time. Now, I agree, these marketing tactics have become very aggressive, but I also think when we're talking about emerging markets, which is the digital age, where young people are continuously building a lot of careers on these platforms, the last thing we want to make Nevada is one of those states that hinder and restrict their ability to actually develop new technologies in this emerging market. So we urge you to definitely oppose this bill. I think we do have a data privacy bill. We'd be more than happy to work with the bill sponsor to ensure that those individuals' informations are protected. But implementing a financial mechanism like this does not impact the business. It actually hurts the consumer. And I think most people love Google Play, downloading free apps. And I think that's where that free comes in, is making sure that that data point. And to the gentleman's comment, Commerce Clause is where the federal government does come in this. And we want to make sure we give them the opportunity to sort that out. But I greatly appreciate the time to address this bill. And if you haven't seen the documentary Social Dilemma, go watch it. Thank you.
Hello, members of the committee. This is my first time on this side of the dais before, so I'm a little nervous. My name is Kurt Thigpen, KURTTHIGPEN. I'm here on behalf of the American Advertising Federation, of which I'm the district governor for Northern Nevada, Northern California. I also own a small business, an advertising agency in Northern Nevada. We are not a billionaire. I wish we were, but we're not. Respectfully, we are in opposition to AB 421 in its current form, which, despite good intentions around data privacy, would essentially impose a tax on advertising data. Such taxes are harmful and counterproductive, resulting in lost jobs, inflated costs, and creating significant hurdles for economic growth and recovery in Nevada. It's important to note that the advertising industry in Nevada accounts for $48 billion of economic activity and over 234,000 jobs. So any tax on that data could inevitably cause job loss and economic harm. Furthermore, the tax would adversely impact many Nevada employers, especially small and medium-sized businesses that rely on this data to reach relevant consumers. We believe that the taxes would be passed on to consumers, which would increase cost to them and lead to a double tax for most products here in the state. As businesses and service industries in Nevada are already struggling to recover from the pandemic and current high inflation levels, this tax would be a job killer and undermine sales revenue in the state. Moreover, regulatory enforcement of this tax would be extremely difficult, complicated, and expensive. In conclusion, we urge you all to pursue other avenues around data privacy that don't involve harmful taxes and support the businesses and job creators of our great state. We just found out about this bill last night, so I'm hopeful that we can work with the bill sponsor on this to remove the tax component. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Brian Wachter, Senior Vice President of the Retail Association of Nevada. We want to appreciate the fact that the sponsor has taken time to meet with us. We understand the intent. We do believe that Nevada needs comprehensive data privacy reform. We don't have that. This is not kind of comprehensive. You've got several different bills going through, and we believe there should be a global approach to data privacy, and we'd be happy to provide some language in that regard. 2 points that were mentioned earlier that I do want to stress is, one, a lot of times this information is voluntary, and part of the agreement that users have with a data or a platform or an app. But most importantly, it's because the way the tax is structured is a lot of these companies, Facebook having been mentioned, they're advertisers. They sell advertising. And they do so to our small and medium retail businesses. And so we think that there's a chance that some of these larger companies are going to choose to just pass along that tax to the folks who are buying their services. And so we wonder if perhaps this is the incentive that we're looking for that would curtail some of that data collection, because you were talking billions and billions of dollars in profit for some of those companies. And so is the tax a disincentive when they're just going to pass it along to our small retailers who are trying to advertise? So we are not indifferent. We look forward to continuing working with the sponsor, but we're not entirely sure that this is going to capture and decentivize the activity that the sponsor is looking for.
Thank you, Chair Bacchus, committee members. I'm sorry. Misty Grimmer with representing the Nevada Resort Association. We have been engaging in conversation with the Assemblywoman on this bill, and the key really is going to be in the nuance of the definitions of who the bill applies to and doesn't apply to, in order for her to for the bill to capture the people that she's targeting, but not be overly burdensome on Nevada businesses. In the hotel resort industry, the gaming industry, we do collect data on our customers. Most of the time it is voluntary through our rewards programs. But we collect that data for the purpose of then being able to make their experience at our properties better. We offer them incentives, we offer them, free play, different things that encourage them to come back and encourage them to want to stay and have a good time at our properties. We do not sell that data. We don't give that data to any other types of companies. We use it solely for the purpose of the experience of the customer. And as the Assemblywoman mentioned, I think we are not the target of this, because what we're doing is just communicating with our customers with the data that we have. And so we will continue to work with her on getting those definitions narrowed down a little bit so that we can hopefully become neutral on this bill.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Paul Moore, acting with the Vegas Chamber. First, I'd like to thank the bill sponsor for meeting with the Chamber earlier today regarding the bill and understanding the better intent of what she's trying to achieve here. We do believe the bill language is very broad and it will capture more business than intended based on our conversations with the bill sponsor. For example, Section 3.1 regarding the definition of a commercial data collector and Section 3.3 with a component member are pretty broad and concerning about who would be captured in that. For example, in the bill as drafted, just maintaining consumer information from each month would subject a company to a possible fee. Section 14, based off what we heard from our membership, and as many of you know, the Chamber has 70 sectors in our membership. We are the largest business association in the state, and they have expressed concern about the burdensome nature that would be inadvertently placed on them as a Nevada-based business. We do appreciate the bill sponsor's willingness to convene a stakeholder, and we look forward to working with her to develop an amendment that would address our membership concerns. Thank you very much, Chair and members of the committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Michael Alonso, and I'm here on behalf of AT&T. AT&T is opposed to AB 421 as written. We have had conversations with the sponsor and will continue to have conversations with her. For similar reasons as the last two speakers, we do not believe, based on those conversations and the testimony provided at this committee today, that our activity is falling within what the sponsor is trying to achieve with this bill. And as the speakers before me have said, the definitions are very broad. It's a difficult bill, a difficult subject matter, and so we understand that, and we'll continue to work with the sponsor. And but we are opposed to the bill as written. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Gabrielle McGregor from the Ferrara Group, appearing today on behalf of Cox Communications. Cox Communications is also in opposition to the bill as drafted. We look forward to working with the sponsor on AB 421. Cox collects necessary data from our customers solely for the purpose of improving our services and product offerings to customers. We do not sell the data we collect. Our concern is that drafted, the bill could subject us to taxation on that data that we are not using in the manner that the bill contemplates. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to BPS. BPS, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in the opposition to Assembly Bill 421?
Callers, if you'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 421, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening. CYRUS, I oppose the bill. Build my time.
BPS, next caller.
Good afternoon. My name is Carl Zabo, C-A-R-L, S as in Sam, Z as in zebra, A as in apple, B as in boy, O as in October. I am Vice President and General Counsel for NetChoice. I am also a professor at George Mason Law School. I stand in opposition to this legislation. Something my mom always told me was there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's absolutely true on the internet. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Today, we're able to do searches, we're able to have email accounts, we're able to upload and download billions of videos, all without paying a single penny. It's done through ads, and it's done through data. And every ad is charged as part of revenue, and as you know, that revenue is taxed today. This legislation, while well-intended, I think kind of misses the mark. Let's be clear. As we've heard previously, this covers brick and mortar stores. It covers supermarkets, pharmacies, casinos, movie theaters, and the list keeps going, in addition to online sites and services. Note, a lot of our brick and mortar stores actually have online websites too. And a lot of our brick and mortar stores use the online advertising to reach customers in ways that they never could before, all of which will be taxed and all of whose costs will be passed down to either Nevadans directly or to the brick and mortars themselves. There's also a registration fee for data collectors, so we will now see new fees on even our small businesses and our mid-sized businesses. And instead of heading down this unique approach, as you heard, that no state has actually done this, closest came would be Maryland, and Maryland's digital ads tax is currently being litigated and has never once gone into effect. Instead of going down this approach, we respectfully ask that you consider a comprehensive privacy bill, and more importantly, when doing so, a giant blind spot in the Nevada data breach law, as well as most every state's privacy law, is that it does not cover nonprofits. I think regardless of tax status, you should be subject to the same privacy protections of the data you collect. So we stand in opposition. We think rather than trying to create a new tax out of whole cloth, which is riddled with challenges, costs, and complexity, you instead follow what many other states have done and create a comprehensive privacy piece of legislation and privacy law that will protect all the privacy for all the Nevadans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. BPS, next caller.
Good evening. My name is Deb Peters, Peters. I am a recovering state senator, certified public accountant with extensive background in state tax policy. I am here today representing the Americans for Digital Opportunity, and we are opposing the Assembly Bill 421. Before addressing the technical reasons for opposition, it's important to address the real-world consequences of taxing data and ultimately taxing advertising. While this bill does not directly tax advertising, it does have a direct correlation to advertising and how targeted advertising occurs. Very simply, this is a tax on all organizations that utilize digital advertising. Like it or not, the American economy has been transformed by data management, and digital advertising. There is hardly an organization in existence today that does not use some kind of digital advertising to reach their consumers. In addition to the real-world consequences of taxing data and digital advertising, the bill's implementation will be impossible. AB 421 seeks to force organizations to pay a tax by providing the legal residency of their customers while simultaneously forcing them to collect actually more data from individuals, not less. The outcome will be an administrative nightmare and will increase the costs and have a negative impact on nearly every organization in Nevada. While the bill does refer to the official Nevada residency requirements, it's extremely unclear how organizations will comply since proving residency is not part of that equation. There is not enough information actually gathered to determine residency as required by the NRS 361.015. Finally, a commercial data collector is defined in AB 421 would apply not only to the collectors of data, but also the organizations and the purchasers of that data. Does every organization in Nevada then need to register if they have the intent to purchase advertising? I'm just not sure this is going to be workable. Given the current state of our economy, compounded by inflation rates, increasing expenditures, organizations will pull back spending and ultimately cause job loss because they can't afford their status quo of operations. This cannot be the desired outcome of this particular bill, and please oppose AB 421. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone in Carson City wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 421? Perfect. We'll go to the phone lines. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 421?
If you'd like to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 421, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch, do you want to come back up and make some closing remarks?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank everyone for this opportunity to start this discussion because I think it is very clear this is a hard discussion. It is a nuanced discussion. It is a challenging discussion. It's a new discussion, but I think it's one that we need to have. And I think that the opposition that we just heard shows how widespread this targeted profiling occurs. And I am absolutely committed to working with stakeholders. Many of the people that came up in opposition, I am working with and continue to work with. The language is in flux. We are working on dialing it in to ensure we are really targeting the people that we are trying to target. But I would also like to say, a lot of people mention that this is voluntary. I don't know how voluntary it is when people don't know how much is being tracked on them. And I think it's also been mentioned that these products are free. And I would like to remind the committee that when a product is free, you are the product. And I think it is our job to ensure that we are protecting our constituents even when they don't know what we are protecting them from. And so I thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 421. And I will open the hearing for Assembly Bill 345, and we'll go ahead and give you guys a moment to switch your presentations.
Thank you, Chair Backus and members of the committee. My name is Vanish Considine. I represent Assembly District 18, and I am here today to present Assembly Bill 345. This bill is about the commerce tax. You should all have the presentation as on the screen, but I will go through it. I want to start with so I probably haven't set this up right. So start with just a brief discussion of what a REIT is. Essentially, what this bill is asking, in 2015, the commerce tax was created. When they created the commerce tax, there was an exemption. Are you going to fix that? Oh, thank you. There was exemption for real estate investment trusts put into the statute, and I have not found a reason as to why. And that made me go down sort of a rabbit colony of information about real estate investment trusts and taxation. And to mirror what somebody said earlier, the point of this bill is that when it comes to taxes, it should be across the board and it should be equitable and fair. And that's the basis for this bill. REITs can be incredibly difficult to wrap your head around, so I'm not going to get in the weeds. Anyone that wants to get in the weeds with this, I'm happy to do it. But essentially, a real estate investment trust is a corporation, trust or associations that meets the requirements of Section 856 of the IRS Code. They provide an investment vehicle that allows individuals to pool their resources, purchase real estate, and avoid paying taxes on the revenue they receive. REITs can generally be thought of as being a kind of a business enterprise that is analogous to a mutual fund for real estate investments. They were started in the 1960s. I can press that button. Maybe I can't. There we go. Okay. They were started in the 1960s, but really they weren't successful for the first 30 years. There was the Real Estate Investment Trust Modernization Act in 1986, which sort of was the moment that REITs really exploded. I'm going to talk more or less about equity REITs. They specialize in property ownership by directly owning, investing in, or acquiring, managing, or developing real property. An equity REIT derives its revenue primarily from the income generated by rental and lease payments. An equity REIT can benefit from appreciation of its real properties. It can grow through increases in rent, and it can cash the excess of taxable income that can be produced through the property, which the equity REIT can use to reinvest in its own. So essentially, I hope that's super crystal clear of how I just sort of explained it, but a REIT is a trust where people put in their money under the rules, the federal guidelines, as long as the investors in the REIT, and what I'm talking about here is the rent generated, as long as the rent generated by the REIT, if that is returned about 90 or 95% to the shareholders, that is not taxable at the REIT level. The REIT is not taxable. That doesn't mean that the person who gets that dividend is not taxed, but they're taxed on income, which is different from commerce tax. So there are several types of REITs. There's a single net REIT where the lessee pays the rent and the property taxes. There is the triple net REIT. A triple net REIT means that the REIT itself in the contract requires their lessee or the entity that's paying the rent to pay the rent, the property taxes, the insurance and building maintenance, essentially the full expenses of the property. Just want to be clear on some of how those work. But there are ones that are all different kinds. But typically, it's my understanding that the majority are triple net REITs. There are REITs, lodging REITs, which I think are more Marriott, Hilton. Those are not triple net REITs, but it's my understanding that it's only like 3% of REITs overall. So I want to focus in on Nevada. So just giving you that history, REITs were not really that numerous until at least 1986 and the 1990s. However, they are becoming incredibly numerous across the country, and I just want to bring this information out. In Nevada, there are 7,937 properties that are owned by REITs. That total property value is about $78 billion. Why I think this is important is, as I mentioned, the Real Estate Investment Trust has an exemption to the commerce tax. So any gross revenue from those properties and that rent over $4 million without that exemption would be taxable. With that exemption, it is not taxable. There is only one REIT that I'm aware of, and I hope my data is up to date, that is actually based in Nevada. All the rest of them are based outside of Nevada. And again, these are shareholders, so this is not money that is staying in Nevada. If we have 7,900 properties that in one way or another are paying rent to an entity, and that all of that money goes out of Nevada, that is what I think is erosion of our tax base. Just to give you an idea of the breadth of REITs, these are, I think, about 70 or more. I know it's hard to see, but they cross all sectors. So there are real estate REITs, there are lodging REITs, there are storage place REITs. They kind of cover multiple areas, and I actually have a kind of a quick list. There's about 4,600. These numbers are in Nevada that I'm talking about now, and all of these are in Nevada. 4,600 single-family rentals are owned by REITs. Over 1,600 outdoor advertising companies or outdoor advertising are owned by REITs. Towers, like cell towers, that's over 1,100. There's 153 that are industrial entities that are owned by REITs or properties, 149 retail, 116 storage, 82 in healthcare, 39 in residential, and additional about 4 or 5 other categories, but the numbers go down. So that makes up that 7,900. So trying to explain this in the way that it works. So let's say that you are a business entity that makes your revenue off of rent. If your rental income is over $4 million, it is likely to be considered gross revenue for the purposes of the commerce tax. Business entities who are engaged in real estate and rental and leasing are under the NIAX category, which is what we use to figure out the taxable amount for the commerce tax. Under that category, which is category 53, the tax rate is 0.25% of all Nevada gross revenue earned in excess of $4 million. So here's an example. A rental company generates $5 million in Nevada gross revenue from the rental of its properties in a taxable year. Then the 0.25% rate would apply to $1 million, because commerce taxes has to be above $4 million, to the $1 million of the Nevada gross revenue and the business entity's commerce tax liability. Essentially, that gross tax would be about $2,500 on that $1 million. So I'm not saying that this is something that's generating hundreds and hundreds of $1 million. Actually, that might be a question, that you would ask to tax, but it does add up when you're looking at 7,900 properties. Not all of them are going to be eligible for the commerce tax, but just wanted to start this conversation and bring this to the forefront. Now, if you're a real estate investment trust, and you have sort of the same scenario, you're making $5 million, that $1 million that would otherwise be eligible gross revenue would be eligible for the taxes under the commerce tax are not, because of NRS 363C 020 2I, they are exempt. So that is the entire PowerPoint. I see this as, like I said earlier, an erosion of the tax base. I see this as something that I don't know if we've had conversations about, but these are just getting larger. In my research, there are master plan communities that are being built for nothing but rentals, which are owned by REITs. So they see this as something that, at minimum, we need to begin having conversations about. But bottom line is, right now, we have money that's leaving Nevada, and we have a commerce tax that is not being utilized for this type of entity, and I'd like to take it out of the commerce tax. Open for questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for our vice chair? We'll start with Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you. And so that this is probably going to surprise everyone. I don't love the idea of taxes, right? However, we have a problem with these REITs pushing Nevadans out of the market and making it difficult for them to get into their first home or sometimes their second home. And so these REITs are causing that issue for particularly the middle class. And I know Georgia has definitely made some headway in terms of legislation to reduce how much they can purchase. So on that note, I don't actually have a question. I just want to say thank you for bringing this.
Thank you. Do I have to say Venetia Considine for the record if I'm the only one here? Venetia Considine for the record. And my issue isn't maybe necessarily what you're talking about. My issue is equity. It is unfair for landlords or business entities that are making their money on rent in Group A to have to pay a commerce tax, but in Group B do not.
I would agree with that. So if I was big enough to make that, I would be paying the commerce tax. Right. But even though it's not really my money, right? But it would still be flowing through my company, and then I have to give it to, sorry, am I okay to follow? Okay, apologies. And then I'm like a pass-through, but that 1099 would show that I make that. And so then I would end up having to pay a tax on money that I don't even profit from. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman. I learned a lot, so I appreciate it. And I could have missed it at the beginning, but could you share why originally it was made like this?
Thank you for the question. Venetia Considine for the record. I can't find anything that says, you mean why this was put in the commerce tax? I could not find anything that said why it was put into the commerce tax. That's kind of what sent me into this interest area to begin with.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for my tentative question of, I think I have one. Do we know how much money has actually been, or is there any sort of guesstimation about how many individuals and/or money has been utilized based upon this loophole? Or lost, I guess, based upon this loophole?
Thank you for the question. Venetia Considine for the record. No, I do not know, and I know that I said that there's 7,900. I don't know what all levels are. I don't know how many of them would even qualify for the commerce tax, and I don't know if anyone would know that answer, and if they do, shout it out.
And I think that was a rhetorical statement, right? Okay. You didn't want me to consult with Mr. Nakamoto on that. Anyone else have any questions for our Vice Chair? Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll move on to testimony and support. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 345? Okay, we'll go to the phone lines. BPS, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 345?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 345, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to testify in support.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 345? Okay, BPS, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 345?
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 345, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to testify in opposition.
Thank you so much. We will move to neutral testimony. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give testimony in the neutral?
Thank you, Chairwoman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to share some insights with this bill. My name is Wiz Rizard, Deputy State Director with American for Prosperity. That's spelled WIZROUZARD. And our response to this, to her point, we believe taxes should be applied across the board. But I think the bigger question, for the first time, want to say this, I do think we should be repealing the commerce tax. And if we had the opportunity to do so, this bill should address that. Because although, yes, the exemption is one that is concerning, we do believe that the commerce tax altogether is one that's pernicious, and it robs Nevadans of capital and the ability to stimulate the economy. So with that, we are neutral, but we do appreciate the bill sponsor for bringing forward an issue within that context. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And BPS, I understand that someone had pushed in opposition. We'll go ahead and take that before we check to see if anyone is giving testimony in the neutral.
Thank you, Chair. Give me one moment.
Good evening, everyone. CYRUSHOJJATY. I'd like to echo the comments made by the person who just spoke. And I also have a suggestion, too. If you can peg the commerce tax to the inflation rate, that would be great, because who knows how much $4 million is going to be in the next several years. And I also hope that there could be other exemptions that could be done as well. I mean, are casinos paying in accordingly? Are they getting exemptions? Yield my time.
Thank you so much. BPS, is there anyone else on the telephone that wishes to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 345?
Chair, there are no more callers to provide any testimony.
Thank you so much. If Vice Chair wants to come back up and give some closing remarks.
I feel like I could talk a little slower now because it's not 6 o'clock. But I want to thank you all. And like I said, I know this can be incredibly complex. If anyone is really interested in learning, I am happy to talk about this issue more. Thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful evening.
With that, we'll move on to we'll go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 345, and we will move on to public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give public comment this evening? BPS, is there anyone on the telephone lines wishing to give public comment?
Yes, Chair. Hold on one second.
Hello again, it's me, Cyrus. I wanted to talk about something that was quite off topic. Jackie Rosen, the senator, supports the Bright Line high-speed train from Las Vegas to Southern California. I would urge you all to adopt some resolution to support it, because we need it. Because American transit services are literally a laughingstock compared to much of the world, or at least compared to the Northeast, I would tell you that. We all know that automobile travel, even if it's done by electric, as well as air travel, has plenty of inefficiencies. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see my family down there later tonight, and I would like there to be a better alternative to get down there. Here's the other thing. It uses less land. And let's just say, for an example, if I want to get to New York City and I find a much, much lower fare to Philadelphia or Boston, I can take the Acela to New York City. That can save me a lot of time and money. And that's the same approach in this part of the country. Not to mention, when people get out of the high-speed rail, and hopefully it's done cost-effective, they can get in another more efficient transit system, either to the airport strip or even, who knows, the residential neighborhood. So I urge you all to adopt the resolution supporting the high-speed rail. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. BPS, do we have any other callers wishing to give a public comment this evening?
Here, the public line is open and working, but there are no more callers on the line.
Thank you so much. And with that, our next meeting will be Tuesday afternoon in room 4100 at 4 p.m. And this concludes our meeting today. We are adjourned.